Hello and welcome to another video by Rick Miracle, me. In the series Freemasonry and Satanism, 63 Part 2, a continuation of this book, Mind Reach, and related material concerning mind control. Mind and body attack, whether it's psychic warfare or even new technologies in electronics and electromagnetism and chemicals put in your body, heavy metals, fluoride that reduces the IQ of people, and premeditatively put into the water supply, and mercury and other harmful things and insane things put in vaccines, hidden messages on TV shows, cartoons even, magazine articles, nightly news. We're under some kind of weird, satanic, so it seems, attack. So I thought I would investigate this a little further. And this is part 2 of the video, which I didn't even leave the foreword in the introduction. Didn't even have time to get into the book. When paranormal becomes normal, where will you be standing when the paradigm shifts? So it says here on the front of this book, scientists look at psychic ability. Introduction by Margaret Mead and foreword by Richard Bach. And the book is written by two gentlemen, scientists, Russell Targ and Harold Puthoff. Hope I'm saying their names right. You can buy this book. I'm just reading pieces of it to try to get my point across. So many times in the history of human thought, a belief once heretical has become a universally accepted truth. Remember, once they thought the earth was flat, now they believe the earth is round. Funny thing, you go on YouTube and there's a lot of videos on there saying the earth is really flat. A lot of confusion out there in our reality, which, by the way, in the Zionist Jewish Protocols of Zion book, the Protocols of Zion, it says that they're going to cause all the information to be a confusing issue. They intend to confuse everybody. Part of the New World Order, taking over the planet, killing off a huge portion of the population. So it might behoove us to find out about the mind reach. So, May 29th, 1973, Stanford Research Institute, Menlo Park, California. The subject is Ingo Swann, I-N-G-O-S-W-A-N-N. And the project is called Scan It. So they have these psychics, and they brought them into the lab, and they wanted to test the psychic abilities of these men and women. We're about to attempt the first in a long series of experiments which, on the face, seems impossible. The man with whom we are working today is Ingo Swann, a New York artist who came to our laboratory preceded by a reputation for extraordinary psychic ability. We are about to ask him to close his eyes and try to experience and describe a faraway place he has never seen. He will be supplied with only the geographic latitude and longitude by which to guide himself. Ingo, we begin. A skeptical colleague of ours on the East Coast has heard of your ability to close your eyes and observe a scene miles away. He has furnished us with a set of coordinates, latitude and longitude in degrees, minutes, and seconds, and has challenged us to describe what's there. We ourselves don't know what the answer is. Do you think you can do it right off the top of your head? I'll try, says Ingo, appearing unperturbed by a request that we as physicists can hardly believe we are making. So the physicists can't even believe what they're going to ask him to do. It's so absurd. To sit in a chair and just have the longitude and latitude handed to you on a piece of paper, and anywhere in the world, and Ingo tell us what's there. So anyways, the coordinates indicate a site that is roughly 3,000 miles away, and we have been asked to obtain details beyond what would ever be shown on any map, such as the small man-made structures, buildings, and roads. This book was written 1977, and I know some people watching this video would say with Google, you could go look at any place in the world pretty much in 2015. But I'm quite certain they couldn't do that in 1977. So Ingo closes his eyes and begins to describe what he is visualizing, opening his eyes from time to time to sketch a map. So he's sitting there in the chair and he closes his eyes, reads off the longitude and latitude, and he has a vision like when you dream. He sees an image and he starts to draw a picture. So anyways, moving on, and as you know, I don't read everything, I just read my highlighted portions. So if it looks like I'm missing something, I just jump over the description. You can get the book and read it. So anyways, he's talking, he goes, there must be a flagpole, some highways to the west, possibly a river over the far east, to the south, more city. He appears to zero in for a closer view. Remember, he's self-induced trance, looking at this location 3,000 miles away. Rapidly sketching a detailed map, see figure 1, showing the location of several buildings, together with some roads and trees. He goes on, cliffs to the east, fence to the north. There's a circular building, perhaps a tower, buildings to the south. So during that experiment, here's the sketch he made. Imagination seems to get in the way. For example, I get the impression that something underground, but I'm not sure. So it is interesting to think about the fact that we humans have these psychic abilities reported for thousands of years throughout all of humanity, any place in the world. You know, even the American Indians could leave their body or maybe possess an eagle and see things far away. The shamans in Peru would take the ashka vine, however you say that, and leave their bodies and go into another dimension to get cures for people who are ill. And then the medical companies and universities would send professionals, scientists, professors, to Peru and say they wanted to study them. But what they were really doing is they were trying to get the recipes for those healing herbs and cures that the shamans got from the other side, Then they would take that recipe back to the laboratories, reverse engineer it, figure out what they had done, and then go patent it and sell it for the pharmaceutical companies. So they were getting medicines from the shamans that the shamans had received from the other side while under the drug-induced state. So my point of all this in this particular series of video 63 is there's more to reality than what a lot of people know. And that's important. That's why I'm doing this. Could be the evil people know about this, and the people who control our reality know about this stuff. But apparently, you don't read about it in grade school, high school, college. They keep it from the public. So what can they do to control the public with these abilities? So moving on, our laboratory experiments suggest to us that anyone who feels comfortable with the idea of having paranormal ability can have it. And as I've been saying all along in my research, we're all psychic. We're all spiritual beings. We have souls, whether people want to believe that or not. And in these bioelectrical bodies, which have a limited lifespan, 70, 100 years, whatever. But the spiritual side of us has much more potential and abilities. At least one hypothesis as to why the country is not filled with people exhibiting a high degree of psychic functioning is that it is frowned upon by society. And we're all familiar with the burning of witches and prophets in the history, and even the crop circles. People have videoed them being made, basically just appearing, as if by magic. And glowing orbs would be swirling, flying around, almost like a spirit or interdimensional being is making the crop circle. So again, there's more to reality than what we know. So moving on. Alright, so psychic abilities probably freak some people out. I knew one girl who could see entities, deceased people I guess, from Maine, and we'd be driving down the road and she'd say there's a little girl standing on the corner, and I couldn't see anybody. She said she's crying, and she was basically invisible to the rest of us. Just makes one wonder. So we share a historic tradition of the stoning of prophets and the burning of witches. So moving on here, we have seen in our laboratory that psychic functioning is a very personal thing. One subject likes to begin with a deep few breaths, while another desires a cigar and a cup of coffee. Some prefer lying down, while others prefer sitting up. One individual finds that ignoring the flash images and concentrating on the slower emerging pictures produces better results. While for another, the reverse is true. What works, works. Another purpose of this book is to share with the reader those observations and experiences that might be useful to him in taking the first steps toward functioning as a psychic individual. Should that be his desire. In our experience, anyone who decides for himself that it is safe to experience paranormal functioning can learn to do so. And I know they have schools you can go to here in the United States and overseas. And ex-psychics working for the government who have quit working for the government started their own schools. Big corporations probably have employed psychics to spy on other companies and God knows what else with the all the big corporations defense corporations working for the government. In our experiments, we have never found anyone who could not learn to perceive scenes, including buildings, roads, and people, even those at great distances and blocked from ordinary perception. The basic phenomena appears to cover a range of subjective experience, variously referred to in the literature as astral projection. That would be the occult. And remember, this series is Freemasonry and Satanism. And the occult, the secret magic, witchcraft, is a huge part of that. And the part that really disturbs me is the abduction of people, and mostly young children, for sacrificial ceremonies. Going on now in 2015. Go on the internet, look it up, some of the testimonies. It'll blow you away. Reality is really crazy. Moving on this book. The basic phenomenon appears to cover a range of subjective experience, variously referred to in the literature as astral projection, the occult, as I just read, simple clairvoyance, hearing things, traveling clairvoyance, traveling, leaving your body and seeing and hearing things, and out-of-body experience, which in my previous videos I've described a out-of-body experience I had. And for this video, I'll do it again. Basically, it was Christmas Day. I was doing charity work all day. I had recently gotten divorced months ago, so I was probably lonely. And I went back to my condo in Orlando, Florida. Laid down on the sofa about 6, 7 p.m. TV was on. A light was on. And closed my eyes and boom, I was out like a light. And the next thing I knew, I was floating by the ceiling up here, looking at myself laying there on the sofa. And I thought to myself, wow, I'm out of my body. And I looked over at the clock. I looked at the TV, and I looked towards the kitchen, and I said to myself, well, that's odd. My white refrigerator was black on top. And I keep a fairly clean house, so who would paint the top of a refrigerator black? But that was just a fleeting thought. So I thought to myself, and I had read Edgar Cayce in the past, so, and other books, Atlantis, and so I knew a little bit about some things. This is before my serious research a couple years ago. So I thought to myself, well, how do I go travel? And I wanted to go travel to where I had done charity work all day, see what they were doing. This was my plan, I thought to myself. Come back to my body and call them up and tell them what I had just experienced. So I thought to myself, well, how do I do that? And I answered myself, it said, just think it. So I said, okay, I want to go. And like a flash, I left the lighted room of my condo. And I guess I perceived I was moving quickly in the dark. And I panicked. And I go, oh my God, have I died? I don't want to die. I want to go back to my body now. And within a second, poof, I wake up, my eyes are open, I'm laying there. And I sit up and I think, wow, that was a crazy dream. Was it a dream? And then I remembered the refrigerator. So I got a chair, I stood on it, and the top of my refrigerator was black because the refrigerator was right next to the stove. So over the many tenants that had stayed in this condo before me, next to the stove, apparently the grease and the dirt and the grime got on top of the refrigerator, and you could take your finger and run it through the dirt and write your name. It was that black. That happened to me. Christmas Eve, Day Eve. There's plenty of books written by testimonies. Many of the out-of-body experiences when people die at the hospital and they're brought back to life. Especially with children who go into the tunnel, apparently meet their grandparents who tell them it's not their time, and they come back and tell their parents after they're brought back to life. And these children had never met their grandparents because they had died before they were even born. So how does anybody explain that? Just seems to me there is another side, there is another dimension where we go as souls apparently is the real reality, and this reality where we are as humans, biblically speaking, God created the earth and mankind, so this reality we live in is the created reality, the temporary reality. And again, this series is Freemasonry and Satanism. And Satan is, of course, Satan, Lucifer. So I guess if you believe in the devil and Lucifer, and it's in all kinds of archaeological documents and monuments and all this stuff in Egypt and worldwide. So if you believe in the devil or demons or beings that are spiritual, then one could plausibly say that there's probably a God. And the Bible's probably true. And other religions. Just my perspective on this issue, which is very important, as we will see in the continuation of this video. With the powers that be have all this knowledge, and supposedly are in cahoots with the evil side of this, which is why they're sacrificing children. So anyways, it says here, back to where I was, the out-of-body experience, parapsychological, externalization or disassociation, psychological or autoscopy, medical. There's some keywords there about the different descriptions of psychic abilities. Here's another one. Paranormal event clearly seen today is seen through ever darkening clouds as time moves on. In a word, the only way to be sure that the observer has seen something psychic is to have him do it himself. Close his eyes and describe what he sees. Of course, some people say only it's dark when they close their eyes, but with patience and encouragement, the first step can lead to others. So if you really want to experience this for yourself, go buy a couple books on the subject. Tim Rifat, Bill Morehouse, Ingo Swann, there's plenty of people out there. Alright, moving on. Then the outbound experimenter, in this case Harold Puthoff, one of the authors of this book, left the division office where an SRI officer, not otherwise associated with the experiment, selected an envelope at random from a collection stored in his security safe. So this was an experiment. Harold would leave the office and somebody would give him an envelope to take with him, which he would open. Each envelope contained a file card on which were traveling orders for a target location within 30 minutes driving time from SRI, the laboratory. As the experimenter remaining with the subject was kept ignorant of the possibilities, so from my point of view, the target team could be going anywhere from the Golden Gate Bridge to San Jose Airport. So they would have Ingo Swann, to sum it up, in a trance, sitting in a chair, and they would give Harold an envelope from a series of envelopes, a box of envelopes, at random, just reach in there, hand it to him and say, go here. And Harold would leave the building, jump in his car, open the envelope and go there, and then Ingo Swann would have to describe where Harold was. Now these are physicists, you know, and I read so many books, you know, it is plausible somebody might be able to fabricate enough information to write a book. But it's hard for me to believe that all the books that I've read on this subject, some of this information is going to get very interesting. So I suppose I will report, and people who watch the video will decide. So, it says here, we don't trust them any more than they trust us. So that's why they have everything done in secret and keep the information from the other parties. In this case, Hal's sealed instructions took him to the Baylands Natural Preserve in Palo Alto, which consists of a natural museum with walkways over the marsh at the edge of San Francisco Bay. The subject trying to view Hal and the environment around him described a kaleidoscope picture of triangles, squares, and more triangles, and some kind of electrical shielding. As it turned out, this description was generated during the time that Hal was lying on his back, looking up at the inside of a 75-foot transmission tower over the walkway, which corresponded quite well to the subject's description. See photo on page 8. He also described a building with a small movie theater, 20 by 30 feet, which was also correct. So, the person in the trance described it as kaleidoscope of picture of triangles, squares, and more triangles, and some kind of electrical shielding. And this is what Hal was looking at. Interesting? Okay, in this case, traveling orders had brought us to a merry-go-round at a playground about 4 miles from the laboratory. We immediately took our subject to the merry-go-round to decide for himself if his drawings bore any resemblance to the target. So the Harold went to this merry-go-round, and the psychic drew these pictures. Close enough? Did he really leave his body? As we crunched across the gravel outside a children's playground, the subject spotted the merry-go-round through the wire fence. That's it, isn't it? That's what he saw in his trance in the laboratory. He asked us as we walked into the little enclosed area, "My God, it really works." All right, a little more here, then I'll move on to another topic. For us, the discovery of remote viewing began with 2 men whom we found to have much more than the average ration of psychic ability, and who furthermore were extremely articulate about how it functioned. These men were Ingo Swann, a New York artist, and Pat Price, a former police commissioner and recent president of a coal company in West Virginia. They virtually taught us how to research psychic phenomena by giving us the insight to focus on those aspects of psychic functioning that people find natural to use in their daily lives. This insight contained 2 important truths. First, we learned that to ask a subject to do our experiment rather than his... First, we learned that to ask a subject to do our experiment rather than his is analogous to asking a pianist who shows up for an audition to play a flute. Second, the more difficult and challenging the task, the more likely the results will be good. That's odd. One subject, our subject, who can describe remote scenes in extraordinary detail when the necessary level is up, often can't do better than anyone else in trying to see a picture on the wall in the next room. A task seen by them to be trivializing a great ability. As we have become known in the public mind as investigators of such phenomena, we have been the recipients of phone calls and letters, the volumes of which indicate that the world is filled with individuals, many in high places, who have experienced this phenomenon but would not readily admit it. I find that when I mention this in public to friends when I'm out and about, that a lot of people volunteered that they've had interesting experiences. Seen a UFO, had an out-of-body experience, and seen images and odd things. It's interesting, but people keep it to themselves. They don't want to be considered a freak. Alright, it is also helpful to arrange for feedback, for example by a visit to the target site when the experiment is over, so the false images of memory and imagination can be separated from the true images of the place or person who has tried to visit. One has tried to visit. Our contribution in the laboratory has been just this, to set up a random protocol for target selection and to give our subjects feedback and reinforcement. Moving on. With regard to physical factors that might play a role in remote viewing, we found out early in our work that electrical shielding did not in any way seem to diminish the quality or accuracy of remote viewing. Alright, Hal was to spend 10 days traveling through Costa Rica on a combination business pleasure trip, and the subject in the laboratory would pick different times of the day and describe where Hal was in Costa Rica. A total of 12 daily descriptions were collected before Hal's return. 6 responses from one subject, 5 from another, and 1 response from an SRI researcher who filled in on a day when one subject was not available. So, although Costa Rica is a mountainous country, the subject unexpectedly perceived Hal at a beach and ocean setting. With some misgivings, he described an airport on a sandy beach and an airstrip with the ocean at the end. He also drew an airport building with a large rectangular overhang. Correct. So this is where the Hal went to this airport in Costa Rica, and this is what the psychic described. And here's a few more pictures of where Hal went and the psychic's description. So that was chapter 1. And I thought I would go over some more here, some other material. A continuation of another subject, but still having something to do with, in my opinion, influencing the mind control, by using new technologies. So if you watched part 1, you know I referenced Nexus magazine, a volume 21, number 4, June, July 2014. And interestingly enough, I mentioned this in the last video, you can't buy Nexus magazine in the USA anymore at Barnes & Noble, Books A Million, whatever. And upon my research, I was told because of the mind control articles in these magazines. So they want to keep this information from the USA public. Why? So we were talking about psychic abilities, but now we're going to talk about electronics and other stuff. Propaganda. Mind control in the 21st century. And I read some of this in the last video. And I put a little ink mark here to tell me where I left off. Recent advances. In light of these past developments, it is perhaps rather surprising to read modern articles describing supposedly recent innovations in mind reading and in mind control technology. And it says here, in which it is sometimes claimed, for example, that scanners, electrodes, and proximity to the subject are required to read and control minds. Of course, it would not be all that surprising if mind control technology has advanced considerably, but that research has been carried out in secret for reasons of national security. And those psychic research experiments were paid for and sponsored by governmental agencies or big corporations doing government work. So I think there was some nefarious activity going on, and it would behoove we the people to be aware of this stuff. CIA-affiliated scientists have certainly conducted much research, which they have been prohibited from sharing with their peers. And inventions that implicate national security are routinely suppressed under the Pentagon's secrecy orders. And again, I'm not reading everything, just my highlighted portions. Recent advances have been made public. The recent advances that have been made public are quite troubling in their own right. Some examples. 2004, 25,000 rat neurons on a glass dish learned to fly an F-22 jet fight simulator. So they took neurons from a rat's brain and taught it to do something like flying a jet fighter simulator, hooking it up to the electrodes. After scientists placed the neurons on the dish, the neurons quickly began to reconnect themselves, forming a living neural network, a brain. Oh my God. The things they can do if this is all true. There is much more to know. Oh my God. Cloning. How far have they advanced in cloning? Brain transplants I've read about. Anyways, moving on with this article. In August 2013, researchers revealed that miniature human brains have been grown in the laboratory. Concerning? And we know in the Georgia USA Guidestones, I keep saying that in Georgia USA, look up the Guidestones, but it says they want to have a world population of 500 million. So I guess about 6 billion people have to die. I think they just don't want to feed us and have us using gas and oil, and they're using the excuse of sustainability. And of course the fabricated issue of global warming, or a coming ice age, or whatever story they seem to have on any given day that's never the same. Climate change, they use that now because they can't get their story straight. The climate always changes. So moving on, it says here, though the writer did mention the specter of what the future might hold, the reader is reassured that the research is primitive territory. Though one researcher did comment that growing larger laboratory brains would be undesirable. The weapons that the governments all over the world are buying right now is off the charts. Everything from aircraft carriers to new jets, microwave beam weapons, lasers. These people seem to be obsessed with war and murder. All right, moving on. And these are the people that have all these technologies and the knowledge about psychic research. On 1 July 2013, a magazine reported a claim by neuroscientist Dr. Sergio Canavar that it is now feasible to transplant the head of one human to the body of another and reattach the spinal cord. Number 4, scientists have constructed from fMRI function, an MRI, functional magnetic resonance imaging, brain scans, random images viewed by the subjects. So with an MRI, when you go to the, say you have cancer and they want to scan your body, they put you in this big machine, an MRI machine. Apparently they can read your brain signals, and on a screen they can put the image what you see, what people see. Imagine if this were to go public on street corners, they were beaming it at you and you didn't even know it, and they were reading your mind, seeing what you were thinking. That would be one way to round up dissidents and terrorists and anti-government belligerents, people who thought this stuff was insane and crazy. They would want to weed you out of society and shut you up. Alright, in research which hints that one day scientists might be able to access dreams, memories, and imagery. The brains of 2 rats, number 5, have been linked, such as one located in North Carolina responded telepathically to the thoughts of the other located in Brazil. The Russians did an experiment like that I went over in one of my other books, where they took some baby rabbits from their mother, took them down in a submarine in the ocean, viciously killed them while they had the mother hooked up to an EKG machine, like a lie detector. And the mother, for some reason, miles away, 1,000 miles away, with the sub under the water, was totally freaking out on the lie detector machine, somehow knowingly that her little babies were being viciously killed. What a person can learn if they go research. The second rat's brain processed signals from the first rat's brain delivered over the internet as if they were its own. The scientists speculated about the future possibilities of a biological computer in which numerous brains are connected. Welcome to the New World Order, or as H.G. Wells said, the Commonwealth. And the New Age, which many of the books were published by Lucifer Publishing Company. Stuff to be aware of. A brain-to-brain interface had been created, number 6, allowing humans to move a rat's tail just by thinking about it. Readers are told that while it is not yet possible to communicate brain to brain with our fellow humans, we may be well on our way to controlling other species. I suppose in our society right now, they say 85% of the people are under some kind of hypnotic propaganda, mind control right now, 2015. So 85% of the population is unaware of even the sky spraying of chemicals over their head, or the ripples they see in the powder that they dump from the HARP or radio transmissions, and all the craziness and propaganda about evil Arabs or this or that. People just watch the nightly news and sponge that information up as if it's true. And then the images in the movies and cartoons, the sexual images, there's videos where investigators have looked at those cartoons and movies, and the things that they found, the imagery that our subconscious picks up on. So you can be obsessed with something and not even know why, and you might be programmed to be obsessed. Hate, you know, now they got that thing with the South Carolina, the Confederate flag, after that white guy supposedly went into the church and killed 6 or 7 black people. And now they're banning the Confederate flag from South Carolina, and they're saying that the South are conservative hate mongers. The programming is crazy out there. That's all nonsense. But the hate that people get festered up inside of them, you can see them talking on TV in front of people. It's all intentional. Like I said, look up the Protocols of Zion. They said they were going to do this. The Report from Iron Mountain is another book. talks about all this stuff in 1960s and 70s. To control the population, they had to find alternates to war and riling people up to be patriotic. And they have these technologies, whether it's the psychic abilities or these technologies to even transplant the brain of one person into another body. Number 7, continue in the ultrasound theme. Focused pulses of low intensity, low frequency ultrasound transmitted non-invasively through the skull to the human brain have been shown capable of producing not only pain but also sound, as well as evoking sensory stimuli. So like I said, you can aim like a police radar gun, see the ones the cops hold, and see how fast you're going. You probably have these kind of guns now they can aim at you, and producing not only pain but also sound, as well as evoking sensory stimuli, so they could make you angry. Alright, moving on here. Accordingly, a lab with a close working relationship with DARPA, the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency. They have many of these secret corporations and companies and institutions. RAND Corporation, DARPA. It's just a long list of these entities. And the things that they are up to. I worked at a major aerospace company for 10 years. I am an electronic engineering technician with a degree from a well-known school, and I worked in a lab with a secret security clearance, and I could tell you a few things about the goings-on in the aerospace corporate world. 10 years, 1979 to 1989. Near the Kennedy Space Center. I worked there. Anyways, the Department of Defense and the U.S. intelligence communities has been looking into using pulsed ultrasound to encode sensory data into the cortex of the brain. In other words, producing hallucinations through the remote and direct simulation of brain circuits. So what they're doing is they're extending the reach of computer technologies to be able to link up to humans. Look up Project Bluebeam. You might be a bit surprised what they plan on in the future. People will look up in the sky and think they see Jesus or Buddha or Muhammad. A big holographic lie, deception. Possibilities are the ability to remotely control brain activity and the creation of artificial memories. Wow. Even Sony has got into the act, patenting a device for using ultrasound to produce hallucinations. Again, described as transmitting sensory data directly into the human brain. Most troubling, one source recently alleged, is that the National Security Agency is using this ultrasound technology to target individuals through their smartphones. So if you're carrying one of these, who knows what it can do, what it is doing. A researcher, number 8. A researcher was able to make a fellow researcher in a different office move his finger just by thinking about it in the first demonstration of human brain-to-brain interface. And I read in David Morehouse's book on psychic remote viewing that they are able to leave their body and not only spy and see what's at a distance, but to enter an individual and take control of that individual. School shootings, maybe? These kids were on drugs and subject to a weak personal self-control. If you ever pay attention to these young people, they say, who did these things and find out they were seeing a psychiatrist and on medications. Does that make them easier to handle? Are all these shootings just little games the security agencies are playing, testing their abilities? Just asking questions. Number 9, a low-cost means of tracking people, even through walls, has been developed. While in the past, individuals could be tracked anywhere by the military using radar technology, this technology might enable entities with fewer resources to track people as well. Number 10, scientists have remotely controlled a worm implanting magnetic nanoparticles into it and then exposing the animal to a radio frequency magnetic field which stimulated the neurons. Number 11, Americans can now be spied on in their homes through their internet-connected appliances, according to former CIA Director David Petraeus. Petraeus made his statement at about the same time that a huge microchip company, ARM, unveiled new processors which will connect home appliances such as refrigerators, washers, and dryers to the internet. And number 12, LED light-emitting diode. Light bulbs have been ostensibly pushed for their efficiency over traditional bulbs. However, LED lights are also semiconductors capable of inducing biological and behavioral effects. So I'm going to leave off this magazine there, just opening our eyes as to some of the seemingly sinister abilities they have. The people who rule our world, who are causing all the death and mayhem and put up the Georgia, USA Guidestones where they want to kill a lot of people, and running the Project Jade Helm project right now, and other military movements all over the world, closing all the banks in Greece, threatening to do the same in the USA. Just some crazy stuff at these times. Some say the end times. So it does behoove us to pay attention to these abilities, whether psychic or technological. With that, I have found a document that should tell us that these warnings are not just paranoid thinking. Hacking without borders in the future of artificial intelligence and surveillance. Found this online the other day and thought it was apropos to this conversation. In this post, Maria Axion looks at some DARPA defense agencies, artificial intelligence surveillance technology in regards to the right of privacy and their potential future use in India. All right. Says here, the U.S. Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, DARPA, is currently funding several artificial intelligence projects which could potentially equip governments with the most powerful weapon possible, mind control. Combat Zones That See, CTS. Combat Zones That See, CTS. Glare here, I can't even see my own screen here. Alright, 10 years ago, DARPA started funding the Combat Zones That See, CTS project, which aims to track everything that moves within a city through a massive network of surveillance cameras linked to a centralized computer system. Groundbreaking artificial intelligence software is being used in the project to identify and track all movements within cities, which constitutes Big Brother as a reality. The computer software supporting the CTS is capable of automatically identifying vehicles and provide instant alerts after detecting a vehicle with a license plate on a watch list. The software is also able to analyze the video footage and to distinguish normal from abnormal behavior, as well as to discover links between places, subject, and times of activity to identify patterns. With the use of this software, the CTS constitute the combat zones that see the world's first multi-camera surveillance system, which is capable of automatically analyzing video footage. So in the past, of course, if they had to look at a video to find out who the criminal was or what somebody did, you had to have an investigator in a laboratory run it through the film projector and zoom in and zoom out and look at it. On that note, something else is interesting with the Jade Helm. Apparently the Jade part stands for some software programs, Joint Artificial Intelligence. And apparently they have a whole list of software programs that run together if they were going to have a revolution, or from the top down, from the government to take the guns from the people, for example. The decisions won't be made by generals and captains and lieutenants, or even the president. It's going to be all controlled by software-written programs that have no feelings, that makes decisions based on algorithms and software coded. And if the computer is designed to target anybody who has a gun and to take them out, kill them, there's no human interface here. It's just going to get turned on, and the computer will dispatch helicopters, trucks of troops, and give them an instruction to go in a home. This guy's got a rifle. Take him out. As soon as it's done, off to the next part of the program. Take this guy out, take that guy out, take that guy out. No human feelings. No decision making by a person. Just computer program. And what do they put in these programs? Scary stuff. And now they got this computer zones that see. So this computer is linked up to every city and town, and cameras and cell phones, probably TVs, satellites. Bizarre. And it occurred to me, I do research on 666, which supposedly is an indication of evil. Aleister Crowley changed his last name, the spelling Crowley, so that it was 666 in a 666 calculator online. You're saying, what's this got to do with anything? Computer, if you put it in a 666 calculator, is 666. What are the odds of that? Monsanto, the Frankenstein, so they say, seed company that redesigned seeds with herbicides and pesticides and God knows what else in them to produce larger, more abundant, pest-resistant, water, drought-resistant foods. So it's really not the tomato or the corn that our bodies are designed to eat and consume. It's an alien product created in a laboratory, which your stomach doesn't recognize as food, sees it as an enemy, attacks it, causing tumor and cancers probably. You can look up the reports on animals and rats. The Monsanto food is evil. So my point is, Monsanto in a 666 calculator is 666. Eric Schmidt, CEO of Google, 666. Pierre Menant, one of the guys who conspired to create the European Union in secret, is 666. Santa Claus is 666. Verichip, that they're going to microchip, is 666. Look up a 666 calculator and see the words that are 666. It'll blow you away. So when you mix this psychic ability with these technologies, and a plan to have a new world order and reduce the population, you have a recipe for some very evil goings-on. Alright, moving on. Although the CTS, Combat Zones that See, project was initially intended to be used for solely military purposes. Its use for civilian purposes, such as combating crime, remains a possibility. In 2003, DARPA stated that 40 million surveillance cameras were already in use around the world. Who the hell are these people? Pardon my language. Who the hell are they? What gives them the right to do this stuff? Moving on, my little anger rant there at this stuff is just, stuff blows me away. So they got 40 million surveillance cameras were already in use around the world by law enforcement agencies to combat crime and terrorism. So anybody who resists this New World Order will probably be labeled a terrorist, an insurgent, anti-government belligerent. You should see the names they're coming up. What is an anti-government belligerent? It's somebody that's asking the government questions that the government doesn't want to answer. Like, who did 911? You question that, you're an anti-government belligerent. And maybe the computer software program wants to take out anti-government belligerents. No human involved. The missile's on its way. The drone is on its way, maybe. Yeah, we're 3 million expected by 2005. 300 million. So they got 40 million cameras. 300 million expected by 2005. How old is this document? Alright, police in the U.S. have stated that buying new technology, which may potentially aid their work, is an integral part of the 911 mentality. So 911 was an inside job. Gave them the ability to go in the Middle East, take over nations, start murdering all the Arabs. Israel's growing like a weed. Russia and Putin get in the way, so they take out the president of the Ukraine and cause all kinds of chaos and anarchy there. Steal all the Ukrainian people's gold, 35 tons shipped to New York days after the president was ousted in the Ukraine. And now the USA is moving ships into the sea to combat China's activities going on in the sea. These people who are running our world are leading us down a very dark path. Considering the fact that millions of CCTV cameras are installed by law enforcement agencies around the world, and that DARPA has developed the software that has the capability of automatically analyzing data gathered by the CCTV cameras, it is very possible that law enforcement agencies are participating in the CTS network, combat zones that see. So I guess a combat zone is going to be each of us, our homes, our activities. However, if such a project were used for non-military level purposes, it could raise concerns in regard to data protection, privacy, and human rights. As a massive network of surveillance cameras, the CTS ultimately could enable the sharing of footage between private parties and law enforcement agencies without individuals' knowledge or consent. Furthermore, there is no universal definition of normal or abnormal behavior. Thus, if the software is used for its original purpose, to distinguish between abnormal and normal behavior, used beyond military purposes, then there is a potential for abuse. You think? As the criteria for being monitored and possibly arrested would not be so clearly set out. So I see all the comments on the YouTube videos and press releases, and a lot of people are so mind controlled that they say it right in their own words on the internet, that there is no God. It's a foolish thing to even think about, and Christians are mentally ill, and gun owners need to be arrested or deported. The mentality of the people out there, they're being programmed, and the people that are programming them are making them the enemies of good, decent people. It's the way I see it. The mind's eye. A camera today which is only capable of recording visual footage appears futile in comparison to what DARPA is creating. a thinking camera. The Mind's Eye project was launched in the U.S. in early 2011 and is currently developing smart cameras endowed with visual intelligence. And I'm not reading everything, as you can see. Go look up this document. On everything I read and discuss and think, you don't have to take my word for it or believe what I believe. You use your own brain. Come to your own conclusions and take your own actions. I think throughout history it has been clearly evident that when they did round up the guns in Germany and China and other places, they then proceeded to start massacring the people. People were defenseless. Why else would they want to take the guns? And create hoaxes like Sandy Hook, which you can go on YouTube and look at videos and decide for yourself. Many of these are clearly staged actors and events to use propaganda for the talking heads on the nightly news and to get elected officials to enact legislation used against the people, because the people can't be trusted. And according to many of the Freemasonic books that I have reviewed, they think the people, like H.G. Wells says, are animals, profane, need to be controlled by these elites. Protocols of Zion, look them up, free online. The report from Iron Mountain, free online. YouTube videos, Satanism, mind control, free online. There is no excuse. Alright, moving on. DARPA is attempting, by this funding, HRL, laboratories, Hewlett-Packard, IBM Research, to carry out this task through the systems of Neuromorphic Adaptive Plastic Scalable Electronics Synapse Program. Wow. Is DARPA funding the creation of the Terminator? The ultimate aim is to build an electronic microprocessor system that matches a mammalian brain in power consumption, function, and size. So they want to create a computer that thinks like a human. Synapse objective is to create biological neural systems which can anonymously process information in complex environments. Like the mammal brain, like a human's a mammal, an animal's a mammal, synapse cognitive computers would be capable of automatically learning relevant and probable stable features and associations, as well as finding correlations, creating hypotheses, and generally remembering and learning through experiences. So let's say they want to go after somebody. The computer program, Jade Helm, has identified somebody, let's say in Austin, Texas. And you can see the computer lights all on the wall lighting up going through the software. And they put that person's name in there. They take the past recorded 7 weeks of that person's activity, develop an algorithm exactly where that guy usually goes in a 24-hour day, every day. So he could be on his way to work on Tuesday at 8 o'clock. And they would be waiting for that guy at his job. The computer would do it all. Oh my. Imagine surveillance technologies with the capability of a human brain. Imagine surveillance technologies capable of remembering your activity, there I said, analyzing it, correlating it to other facts or activities, and predicting outcomes. And now image such technologies used to spy on we the people. As H.G. Wells wrote in 1928, 1930, 85 years ago, the world, his book, The Conspiracy, The Open Conspiracy, H.G. Wells, I made a video on that, just the last one. And he was very anxious about all that, very focused, of a world commonwealth And he did not like the little man, the common person. And then he wrote the New World Order, and then of course H.G. Wells wrote Island of Dr. Moray, and the War of the Worlds, the spaceships, Time Tunnel, 85 years ago. And then of course Albert Pike wrote Morals and Dogma in 1880, 1890, 125 years ago. Detailed 3 world wars that would be required to create the New World Order, and again called all the common people profane. The Zionist Jewish people call us goyim, and goyim means cattle, and anybody knows if there's too many deer in the woods, usually you can get more permits to shoot deer to thin out the forest. And if they think people are cattle, and they think there's too many of us, which there isn't, they just don't want that many to be using food and wine and gas. So they want to take out 90% of the population. And they have all these computerized technologies. And they're evil people. It could only be a matter of time before Indian law enforcement agencies start using such artificial intelligence surveillance technology to supposedly enhance our security and protect us. And if you believe that, I've got some swampland for sale in Florida. Brain-computer interface, BCI. Just reading my highlighted portions as usual. Remember Orwell's thought police? Was Orwell exaggerating just to get his point across? I've read 1984. And what they do with these technologies, they find out what your biggest fear is. And that one person in that book was afraid of rats. So they devised a cage that fit over his head with a little tube and another small cage with a rat. And they could open up the tube and the rat would go into the cage and sit on his face and eat his face. And the man was so freaked out by that, he would have told them anything. He would have said he loved the devil because fear of that rat gnawing on his face. Go read 1984 if you haven't read it, and you'll see how evil is. The people who worship Lucifer and Satan, the Bohemian Grove. Go look up Alex Jones and Bohemian Grove and see your politicians and leaders from the world in long robes and naked underneath, screeching and hollering, throwing a baby in a fire under a giant owl, shipping in gay men because they don't allow women for sex, which is a satanic ritual. You can't make this stuff up. Go look up Alex Jones, Bohemian Grove videos on YouTube. So unlike the thought police, which merely arrested individuals who openly expressed ideas or thoughts which contradicted the party's dogma, today technologies are being developed which can literally read our thoughts. That which anybody who is on their bad list, who goes against the new government Supreme Court rulings of homosexual marriage and transvestites, and now even the pedophilia, playing with children, people are getting in on the action. If you don't agree with their new programming on what you're supposed to believe, you could be called an anti-government belligerent, an insurgent, or a terrorist. The computer program could be targeting you at this very moment. Or me. Once again, DARPA appears to be funding one of the world's most innovative projects, the Brain-Computer Interface, BCI. The human brain is far better a pattern machine than any computer, whilst computers have greater analytical speed than human beings. The BCI is an attempt to merge the two together and to enable the human brain to control robotic devices and other machines. Look what the evil people have done. The Franklin cover-up, the book, go look it up and buy it. When the banks were stealing money and there was a big investigation in the Franklin cover-up in this big city, they found out it was much, much more sinister than they had ever imagined. the trafficking of children for sex, and much more horrific things within the government leadership. And then there's this guy over in London, Sewell, who was supplying young children for sex to all the elites. And they had to cease and desist on the investigation over there. They said because of national security issues, because this whole sinister stuff was going to the top levels of government. If the brain can be used to control computers or other technologies, does this ultimately mean that computers can also be used to control the human brain? Researchers from the University of Oxford and Geneva and the University of California, Berkeley, have created a custom program that was specifically designed with the sole purpose of finding out sensitive data such as an individual's home location, credit card PIN, and date of birth. To extract such information, researchers rely on the P300 response, which is a very specific brainwave pattern that occurs when a person's brain recognizes something that is meaningful. So I suppose if you saw your girlfriend approaching and your face would smile up and your brain would have a P300 response. Or somebody dropped a $100 bill and your brain would see it, get excited, and have a P300 response. So anything that's meaningful, whether this is personal information, such as a credit card details, or an enemy in a battlefield, according to DARPA. Anyways, reading on, this constitutes the human brain as a new war-fighting domain of the 21st century, as experiments have proven that the brain can control and maneuver quadruple drones and other military technologies, enhanced threat detection through BCI scan for P300 responses. So you got your cameras everywhere, and then they can pick up on your P300 brain response. Read your mind. And the literal control of military operations through the brain definitely appear to be changing the future of warfare. Along with this change, the possibility of manipulating a soldier's BCI during conflict is real and could lead to absolute chaos and destruction. I know one of the huge problems they had in Britain and London, the UK, during World War II, I suspect during World War I also, is they couldn't get the soldiers to be vicious and murderous and want to kill the Germans. So, you know, their heart wasn't into it. They didn't want to be out there murdering everybody. And the Germans didn't really want to murder the Brits. So my point is the governmental leaders can't seem to get the soldiers to be murderers and killers at their will. So that's why they're creating the computer programs. And Obama has let many of the leading military leaders loose from their jobs, fired them, let them go. Apparently because they said they wouldn't fire upon U.S. citizens if ordered to do so. Anyways, this constitutes security agent Barnaby Jack of IOA Active demonstrates the vulnerability of biotechnological systems, which raises concerns that BCI technologies may also potentially be vulnerable and expose an individual's brain to hacking, manipulation, and control by third parties. If the brain can control computer systems, and computer systems are able to detect and distinguish brain patterns, then this ultimately means that the human brain can potentially be controlled by computer software. And there you go. Some young man in Charleston goes into a black church and shoots 6 or 7 people. And I saw a couple videos with some black people talking about that young man and said he was their friend. He didn't hate black people. Could this stuff be real? Could they be using these as tests of their new warfare technologies? Controlling people? Imagine. Will BCI be used in the future to interrogate terrorists and suspects? What would that mean for the future of human rights? Can we have human rights if authorities can literally hack our brain in the name of national security? How can we be protected from abuse by those in power? And again, I say, go watch Alex Jones in the Bohemian Grove and see what the people in power do. If the most precious thing we have, our thoughts, can potentially be hacked, human rights are essential because they protect us from those in power. But the privacy of our thoughts is even more important, because without it, we can have no human rights and no individuality. And I know that like Oregon and Spain recently and other things, the governments are issuing what we call gag orders. They're saying anybody who talks about this particular topic or subject or bad about the government is guilty of a crime. Can you imagine a computer picks up on your talking on a cell phone about bad about the government, and automatically the computer goes to a certain routine, dispatches people to your house? Alright, I'm almost through with this video. Mind control is a vicious game to play and may constitute some of the scariest political novels as a comedy of the past. Nuclear weapons, bombs, and all other powerful technologies seem childish compared to the BCI, which can literally control our mind. Therefore, strict regulations should be enacted, which would restrict the use of BCI technologies to visually impaired or handicapped individuals. In other words, use the BCI technologies for good purposes. But we know with the Georgia USA Guidestones, where they say they want to kill 90% of the population, and many books that I have gone over that say the same thing, including the Protocols of Zion and the report from Iron Mountain, H.G. Wells, Morals and Dogma, the Bible for the Freemasons, the abduction of children on an ongoing basis these days for satanic holidays to sacrifice the children. These things are going on, and they have these technologies. Though these technologies currently are not being used in India, explicit laws on their use of artificial intelligence surveillance technologies should be enacted in India. And I would say they should be enacted in the United States. But I think our government is taken over by the evil forces. And when you're talking about it, you better be careful, because you might be deemed a anti-government belligerent, insurgent, or terrorist. And the computer program may select you for a visit from a SWAT team to help ensure that they do not infringe upon the right of privacy and other human rights. Apparently anyone can buy a emotive TV NeuroSky BCI online to mind control their computer. So you can get your hands on this technology with only $200 or $300. If the use of BCI was imposed in a top-down manner, then there would be some hope that people would oppose its use for surveillance purposes. But if the idea of mind control is being socially integrated, the future of privacy seems bleak. And I also know that many people in the USA don't really comprehend what the Constitution is and Bill of Rights that were designed to protect us. And apparently, the government officials right now are ignoring the Constitution and pretty much declaring that the people at large are now the enemy. Because they're polluting the planet and everything is unsustainable, so they logically have to go ahead and kill about 90% of the population. Which I think all the purposes and reasons they're declaring, I think, are false, deceptive, insane. I think they just want to have a new world order and only have enough people around for their needs. Slaves for factories and farming. People to drive buses, and sex slaves, and who knows what other insidious purposes, things they have in mind. They have planned for the future. Like the movie Hunger Games, the movie Divergent. many of these end-of-the-world scenarios and insane chaos and anarchy. So that's why I went over psychic abilities and technologies and combat zones that see and DARPA programs and Jade Helm. It certainly seems like they're moving ahead with their plans. And a lot of people are not awake. They're not going to see it coming. Thank you for watching my video, Rick Miracle reporting.